Hey everyone, how's it going? And let's talk about Botania. So recently I did a Reddit post showcasing off my Botania setup, and a couple people asked for tutorial videos on how to work with Botania. So let's go ahead and get started. So one of the first things you're going to want to do when you're starting Botania is make the in-game book, and then that houses all the recipes, all the basic tutorials from VazKey, and all the information you're really going to need for this mod. There's really no place else to look up the recipes, and actually, while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and just turn off the daylight cycle so the daylight doesn't change. But we're going to want to make the book so we know exactly what we're doing in Botania. So search up Lexica Botania, and you can go ahead and get yourself one of those. It's just a sapling with any sapling in the game with the book, and you can see it's actually any sapling in the game that's registered under Or Dictionary. So any sapling in the game should work for this, which is nice. So you go ahead and open your book, and you're going to come to this page, which has multiple different tabs on how to navigate through the book. So you have your basics mechanics, and then you have your mana manipulation. You can go ahead and left click to open up the tab, and right click will bring you back a page in the book. It sort of works similar to how the Hardcore Quest mod book works. So you can just go ahead and you can click around here, you can look around through all the stuff. And as you're clicking around, if you notice, anything in italics is basically required to progress through the mod. So basically this entire tab is required to progress through it. Mana manipulation, these three items are required. These two are required, and so on and so forth. So basically anything that's in italics is almost necessary to progress through the mod. Just so that way you know what to look for when you're trying to look for, basics and fundamentals for Botania. And as you're going through the book, if you are reading along and let's just say you get to this page or whatever, you want to come back to read it later, you can go ahead and add a bookmark which will save it. And so if you just want to quickly shortcut to that bookmark, you can just, click on that bookmark and you'll be brought there. And you just shift left click it to remove, and then, right click to go back to the main menu. So that's the in-game documentation for Botania, and you just, click around and read up on everything that's in here. So the next thing you want to do is go find flowers, because if you didn't know, Botania is based on magical flowers. If you don't know what a botanist is in real life, botanists typically deal with flowers, and they're flower shop owners, and they sell your little rose bouquets and things like that. But you're going to want to walk around the world and look for flowers. If you don't have Wayla installed, you're going to have to memorize the textures of what they look like, or look for flowers that are having this little shimmering particle effect. So that way you know that it's from Botania. So just go ahead and collect some flowers. Just walk around. You don't need a lot of flowers. The main ones that you're going to need to start the mod are the white, yellow, red, and orange ones to basically get started with it. What I recommend is just taking about 15 minutes of your time, 20 minutes of your time walking around, skipping through the wilderness, picking flowers, and just having it all in a chest waiting for you. So I'm going to go ahead and get some flowers ready, and we can progress shortly. Alright, so now I've got all my flowers. I just went to go ahead and cheated myself a stack of each flower, and I got them all ready here, so I can start doing some Botania stuff. So if we look through the book, we go to the Basics and Mechanics tab. This will start teaching us how to actually do stuff with Botania, how to get flowers, how to start manipulating the mana and the magic that's inside these flowers. So you can read through this. First thing, this will tell you all about the Lexica Botania, what it is, and you can see any entries typed in italics are basic entries which are basically required to progress through the mod. Mystical flowers will tell you all about the flowers. What's also nice about these is that you can craft these into their respective petals, so whatever color flower you have will progress into that color of petal, and you can go ahead and use a pestle and mortar, grind up those petals, and get some dye out of them. So you can use them to dye wool or anything like that. So if we just go ahead and go search up floral dye, or just floral, if we just go ahead and see the use of it, you can see it's just used as a regular dye because it's registered in the Or Dictionary as the dye. So the first thing that once you've done collecting all your flowers and getting your books so you know what to do, is the first thing we're going to need to make is a petal apothecary. So in order to actually create these flowers that we're going to be using to generate mana, we need the Petal Apothecary. So what this does is this takes all the energy that's stored in these flowers and will turn it into a new flower or a new thing that you're going to try to create. So in order for Botanias to create plant life, you need to infuse the energy that's in these flowers together into one specific thing. So that's Petal Apothecary. You can put a water bucket in it, or you can use a new device, which we'll go over later in the tutorial. But you basically take a water bucket and you fill it inside the Petal Apothecary, and once you throw all your combination of petals and stuff in, you can throw some seeds in, and that will finalize the process and create your flower that you're looking for. You can shift right click, that's the thing, you can shift right click the Petal Apothecary and remove the last item that you throw in. So this is how you make the Petal Apothecary. It's just a slab with any kind of mystical petal inside it. So if we just go ahead and show the recipe for it, it's any kind of mystical petal with cobblestone in the bottom row and in the center, and then 2 slabs in the top left, top right. So I got my Petal Apothecary. Let's go ahead and plop that down. And let's just get ourselves 2 things of water. So I have an infinite water source nearby. Let's get a water bucket. So there you go. So now to go ahead and fill your Petal Apothecary, you just put water in it. And that's easy. You can't put more in there. It won't let you put more than a bucket. And you can't pipe in water. You have to right-click it physically with a bucket, or the item that we'll go over with later. So the first thing you're going to use your Petal Apothecary for is to make something called, if we go ahead and go back to the tab, is called a Pure Daisy. So the Pure Daisy, what it does is that it doesn't use any magical energy or mana cost or anything. It just simply will work without taking any kind of input power, or what do you want to call it. But what this will do, this will change any wood or stone into its respective counterpart of living material. So wood turns into living wood, and stone turns into living rock. So all we do to make the Pure Daisy is we take 4 white petals, we throw in the Petal Apothecary, and then we throw seeds in there. Which actually reminds me, I need some seeds. Let's go ahead and get some seeds. We'll get some mystical white flowers. We'll get ourselves the mystical white petals. And if we look in the book, it says we need 4 white petals in the Petal Apothecary. So we go ahead and drop 1, 2, 3, and 4 mystical white petals in the Petal Apothecary. And to get our Pure Daisy out, we drop some seeds. And look at that, we now have a Pure Daisy, and we can just go ahead and plop it on the ground, and it will work just like a regular flower should. So now that we have our Pure Daisy, oh, hello Mr. Pig. Now that we have our Pure Daisy, we can go ahead and plop it down and get some wood and some stone. And we can go ahead and plop it around the Pure Daisy, just like the book shows on this picture. So you just go ahead and plop it around the Pure Daisy, and you'll know it's working when you see white particle effects spitting out of these wood blocks. So I'm just going to go ahead and get myself another Pure Daisy. Oh, that's the Oxide Daisy. I want the Pure Daisy. So I can plop down another daisy and then do the same thing with just regular stone. So both of these will start sparkling and taking their time to convert over to their living counterparts of living rock and living wood. So let's go ahead and wait for this to convert, and I'll be right back when it's converted. So there you go. All it does is just, after a while, it will just, convert over to its living counterpart. You can just go ahead and dig it up like it's any other material of the same type. So we can go ahead and dig up the living wood, and now we have some living wood to use. And the same thing will happen with the stone. In a second, it will go ahead and transform into living rock. So there you go. So now it's living rock, and then we can just go ahead and dig it up. And once we're done, we can just go ahead and take some more and just put it around here. Trust me, you're going to need a lot of this for some of the stuff that's required later, so it's really helpful to have a lot of living wood and living rock on hand for the future. So if you just want to go ahead and get yourself like a stack or 2 at the beginning, it's probably helpful to have. Otherwise, you can just probably just make it as you go, and then do some other things while you're waiting for this to create its living form. So now that we have our living rock and living wood, we can now go ahead and use it for the first thing we're going to need is called the Wand of the Forest. So this is basically like the wrench of Botania, or the wand of Botania, that would be equivalent to like Thaumcraft, essentially, except for you don't use Wand Foci, but it's essentially like the wrench of Botania. So to go ahead and make that, you're going to need to make some living wood twigs, and then just put any 2 petals that you want in the respective areas. So, and living wood twigs are 2 living wood on top of each other. So if you do a full set around a pure daisy, you'll have enough to make living wood twigs plus 2 extra to make your wand. So I'm going to go ahead and do a blue and black flower. So if I just go ahead and take these 2, let's put the extras ones away. I don't have a crafting table. Let's go ahead and get one of those. Let's put our crafting table down, and if we go ahead and use our living wood twigs and put the black petal here and the blue petal here, you'll see we'll get our wand of the forest. And what's really nice about the wand of the forest is the fact that you can interchange these colors and use whatever colors you want to make it. So if I see the blues on top and the blacks on bottom now, I can go ahead and change the colors, and we'll change those respective areas to reflect what your current crafting recipe is. So I'm going to go ahead and do the blue on top, actually, just, change it up a little and just make it a little more colorful. The actual in your hand texture is different, but the icon is what your actual color is. So the buggy texture might stay the same with this whole blue thing still over here, but it still works just like you really wanted it to. So let's go ahead and pick up more living rock and living wood. And you're going to be doing this a lot, just because there's really no way, at least at the beginning, to automate this creation of it unless you have some kind of computer detecting when it's changed blocks, or some drone from like Pneumaticraft that's going to be mining the blocks for you. So really going to have to do this manually for a while. Alright, so now that we finally have all the materials that we need to get started with Botania, which is living rock, living wood, and some flowers, the last thing you're going to need to go get is gold. Because you're going to need some gold to create the first piece of Botania to actually start generating the mana, which is the essential part of Botania. Botania is really focused on mana generation. So if we go to the next part of the book, you can see the Wand of the Forest last thing. Let's go ahead and go to Mana Manipulation, and let's go to Introduction to Mana. So mana is basically the backbone of Botania. This is the thing you're going to be using to run all of the flowers, to put it lightly, run all the flowers to actually do things for you. So you're going to need to create mana, you're going to need to move mana, you're going to need to be able to store mana. So mana is, you can find out how to create mana using generating flora, and you can find out how to use mana in functional flora. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create mana. So in introduction generation, generating mana is considered to be like the hardest part, because you have to figure out what flowers you want to use and how to sustain their generation of mana. There are a couple ones that are fully automatic, but of course they're the slowest ones, and there are other ones that require different fuel types of different kinds. So what you can do is just generate different manas, and then there's all of these different flowers that you can use to generate mana. And you can see on italics the one called Daybloom. This is the one that you need to progress. You have to create a Daybloom at some point in order to progress through Botania, because there's no other way to create any of these ones without using the Daybloom's mana that you get from it. So the first thing you need to do is create the Daybloom, and this just simply works in daylight. So anytime that it's bright outside and it's daytime, this thing will generate mana for you. So again, as the book says, it's rather slow, and you're going to need a whole bunch of these to really get started. So you're going to need to create a bunch, like 10 or 12, or really go for like 16. I normally start with like 9 and then just let it go for a while I'm busy mining. So the first thing we need to do is create the Daybloom, and that's 2 yellow petals, an orange, and a blue. It's actually a light blue. My apologies. So let's go ahead and get a yellow, a light blue, and an orange. So go ahead and get the petals. Let's go ahead and get rid of any eye. But again, we need to put water in this thing first. So as it says, we need 2 yellow petals, 1 orange petal, and a light blue petal. And this actually would give me a good time to showcase what happens if you put the wrong stuff in. So you'll see that I have the right things in, but say I accidentally put in an extra petal or something like that. This won't work. You need to have the exact creation of items in the petal apothecary for it to actually work. So to get the actual item that you dropped in last, just shift right click the Petal Apothecary with an empty hand, and you'll get the last item that you threw in. So I can just keep doing this and get all the items. If you accidentally place a petal, you'll see that it's actually sparkling. This happens when you're like trying to shift right click to get all the stuff out of Petal Apothecary. You'll see that it shift right clicks on the ground. You can just break it and pick it up. But anyway, so let's create the Daybloom, which is 2 yellow petals, an orange, and a light blue petal. So 2 yellow, 1 orange, and 1 light blue. And you can see them all swirling around. So let's throw in the seed. And now we have our Daybloom, which is nice. So let's go ahead and we'll break that. And we'll plop it down right there. And you can see it really doesn't show anything when you just put it down at first. But if you hold up the Wand of the Forest and mouse over it, you can see that a little like GUI pops, not really a GUI, but like a heads up thing shows up in front of your screen. And if you right click it, you can get some information about the Daybloom. So you can see that it's going to be sitting here, and I can see how much mana that it has inside here. So actually, let's do, I don't know if this actually creates mana during a non-daylight cycle. So you're going to need some daylight to progress in order for it to get some mana. But we can see as we right click, we'll have some mana generating and the bar's going up, which is nice. This is the only way that you can really get mana at the beginning of the game. So now that we're actually creating mana, we need a place to put it, because the flower's internal buffer is really tiny. I mean, this thing does not store like any mana at all. So you're going to need a place to move it and a place to put it in order to do more with it. So that's where mana manipulation comes in. So we need a mana pool, basically, to store all the mana. So we need to store the mana in here in order to actually really use it for stuff. So what you need to do is get some of that living rock, which is why I said you can probably get a good amount of it, because it's just helpful to have in the future. So we get 5 living rock and just put it into a U shape, sort of like a minecart or a boat. So I just get 5 living rock, put it into boat shape, and I have my mana pool. So if I go ahead and I plop down my mana pool, you would say that this is not, let's actually put it right next here for demonstration. You can see that it's not outputting the mana into the mana pool. This is just creating more mana, but this is not accepting the mana. That's because you need something to actually extract the mana out of the flower and then put it into the mana pool. So let's put the mana pool over here, and to extract the mana out of the flowers, you're going to want to use a mana spreader. So this is the most important component manipulating mana. This is the block that allows mana to travel from point A to point B. So, as I said, we need to get this mana out of this flower and put it into this mana pool. And the only way to do that is with a mana spreader. So, you can take down the mana spreader, and let's just go ahead and go to the crafting recipe. I'll show you the features in a second. But it's 6 living wood, a gold ingot, and then any kind of petal in the middle. So if we just go ahead and go here, show our living wood here, and then I'll just go ahead and use one of the extra petals that I have from the other crafting recipe and just put the gold ingot on the left side. We see if we get the mana spreader, and any petal works. It's just, again, it really matters what petal you feel like using at the time. So now that I got my mana spreader, the only way to move it is, you can see right here on the icon is that there's this little hole in the front of the block. Actually, let's just go ahead and place it down. You can see this hole at the front of the block. That will face you whenever you put it down. So if I face this way, it will face me when I put it down. And if I face this way, I'll put it down. And it even works when you're placing it looking up. And if I have, I got the dirt. So if I do it this way, it'll even do it when I'm looking down. So whatever way you're facing, it will face the opposite direction. So it'll point towards you when you put it down. So since this green thing is where the mana is going to be exiting, and the mana is coming in from the back, this means I need to stand in front of the Daybloom here, and then put the mana spreader down. And you can see that when I now right click, all the mana is gone out of the flower. Well, where did it go? It now went into the mana spreader. So the mana spreader is now collecting a huge internal buffer, and it's going to eventually, when it gets enough mana, it's just going to go ahead and put it into the mana pool. And you can see that when I'm holding the Wand of Forest, it's got the nice beam showing you the actual direction that the mana spreader is pointing, where it's going to put its mana at one point. So, since you can see that's pointing directly to the mana pool, it's going to go directly into the mana pool and store it in here. Now, when it doesn't have any place to kind of put it, you can see that after over here, there's this dot. After this dot is anywhere where you're going to start losing mana if you put it any further than this. So if I put my mana pool here, I'm going to start losing mana every time it decides to shoot a mana burst because it's past this point. This is the last point of the highest mana gain out of it. So you're going to want to put it somewhere after before this point. So as I said, I'm just going to keep it nice and close and put it like right here. I almost failed to mention, the Mana Spreader actually has an ability to be pointed in any direction you want. You can simply either go behind it, shift right click a few times and just hold it and then point it yourself manually so you can watch where the green beam is going, and then that's the direction it's currently going. So let's just say I want to point it towards the ocean or towards the sky. Let's point it towards the sky like this. So you can see I can just shift right click and change the angle of it manually, or if you shift right click it and you notice that you get the wireframe going around it, the glowy wireframe, that means you currently have this object selected to manipulate with its current direction. So if I just go ahead and have this selected with the wireframe and then shift right click on a destination, it's going to go ahead and automatically point itself towards that mana pool for me. But then you got to make sure that you have that wireframe, because I can shift right click this mana pool all day, but if I don't have it with that wireframe, it won't point itself there. So to simply turn on and off the wireframe, just shift right click it and make sure that you're going to be careful when you're moving around these mana spreaders, because if you shift right click and let's say, oh, I want to move it to this pool here and just do that, no big deal. But then you want to move this mana spreader over here, this thing will not change because I still have that mana spreader selected as the one to change. So you can see that even though this wireframe shows up, this one is still currently selected because I never deselected it, then selected this one, and then pointed it there. So again, just be careful when you're trying to manipulate the motion of these things. It'll take some getting used to, but once you move it a few times and you experiment with the different patterns and how you can move them, you'll be perfectly fine with it. Alright, for the sake of demonstration, I went ahead and just plopped down a whole bunch of day blooms just so we can get a whole bunch of mana going, and I can showcase off the next part of the Mana Spreader, which is the Mana Burst. So I can get some more flowers actually here. Maybe that'll speed it up a little bit more. So we can see this Mana Spreader is building up its internal buffer, and once it hits a certain point, it's going to do that and shoot the mana into the mana pool. And you'll know you have mana in the mana pool when you see this little water effect. That's the mana actually being stored in the pool. So then you know that you actually have mana inside the pool. And these mana pools actually have a decent internal buffer. It's going to take a while to fill these up with most generation methods. There's really no upgrades to these things, so you only have one tier of mana pool, so there's no upgraded storage. So if I search mana pool, there's no upgrade to this. It's just this one mana pool. But even so, there's a huge buffer in this thing, so really don't have to worry about filling this up unless you're going to be using it for a lot of mana, or you're going to be generating a lot of mana. So, another thing to note about day blooms, since they're the first game flower, is that you might notice this little grid pattern in between them. This means they're actually performing inefficiently, and the thing that's bad about them is you don't want to have them next to each other. So if I go ahead and break this one here, these grid lines are going to now disappear, which means now that these two aren't having conflicts with this flower, and if I go ahead and break this one, this flower is now generating at maximum speed because there's no other flowers nearby, at least adjacently in the north, south, east, and west directions, that were going to cause conflicts with it. So if I go ahead and do a checkerboard style pattern with these, like this, you can see there's no more grid lines anymore, which means that all these flowers are now generating at their max efficiency. So you can see I'm actually getting mana at a decent rate now, which it's about maybe a tick a second right now. But if I go ahead and bump these up with more flowers in the way, so now we're getting this inefficient grid pattern, you can see it kind of slows down a little bit. I'm not getting as much mana as I used to, or I might be getting as much, but the benefit of having them all close by is not helped. So you're gonna want to space these flowers out and do more with them. So this setup right here is the best setup that you could have with these day blooms because there's no conflicts with any of these flowers. Let's go ahead and get it back to noontime. Now all the later flowers require something called a mana petal. Now these mana petals, if you just go ahead and shift left click to see the recipe are just a petal dropped inside a mana pool. So you drop them in there, I'll get the mana petal version of it. So I got a mystical blue petal, drop it in, I now got the blue mana petal. So it's a really easy mechanic. You just drop your petals inside the mana pool and you'll get the mana versions of them. So now that I've gone ahead and showcased how to basically start generating mana, let's go ahead and showcase some of the other methods that we have of generating mana. If we go ahead and go to the Lexica Botania, there's a whole bunch of other flowers that you can use to generate mana. One of them is the Endoflame. And this is by far the easiest to understand flower, and it's basically, it is a furnace. So if we go ahead and go here, the Endoflame does exactly, it absorbs custom combustible items or blocks in the nearby vicinity. So it acts like a furnace. So basically anything that can burn, you can just toss it next to the Endoflame and it will generate mana for you. So let's go ahead and get a couple mana spreaders just so I have them ready. And then let's get ourselves an Endoflame. Endoflame, there we go. So, if we're going to plop down an Endoflame, we're going to go ahead and get a mana spreader on it. If I pop down anything that can burn, so wood for example, if I just plop it down right next to the flower, it should pick it up, and now you'll see that it's generating this red effect. That means it's generating mana it's actually working, and it's, creating mana to be used in the mana spreader, and eventually the mana spreader is going to shoot it into the pool, which should be like right about now. Oh, come on, don't make me a liar. Oh, I fell just short. I'm just going to go ahead and drop down oakwood planks so I have more of them. But you can see that the mana pool will just generate straight into the mana spreader and go into the pool for us. So we can go ahead and plop down a few of these, and these ones, the Dayblooms are the only one that have this whole grid restriction thing of how inefficient they are in a close-by vicinity. Most of them don't require you to have this spacing between them. It's just the Dayblooms, so that way you don't have them all, clustered together like this and have this whole grid pattern thing. Kind of prevents clustering of flowers. But these ones, doesn't matter. You can toss down almost any source of burnable thing. So I can toss down a piece of coal, and that will get sucked up eventually. So there you go. They get sucked up by that flower. So I can toss down that. I can toss down a piece of charcoal, and that will work as well. You can even toss down blaze rods if you want to, which is really handy. So let's go ahead and toss down a blaze rod, and that will get sucked up as well, and that will also be used as fuel. Now, the thing to note about the Endoflame is that you can't use anything that has a byproduct. So, for example, lava buckets, as the book says, you can't use lava buckets because the Endoflame can't absorb the bucket. So if I go ahead and get a lava bucket, although it has a burn time, it will not work because the byproduct of a lava bucket is a bucket. So you can't use lava buckets. You have to use some kind of burnable material that doesn't have any byproducts. So, my example is blaze rods work wonderfully. So I can just toss down a whole bunch of them, and the flowers will suck them up and create a ton of mana for us. These things are great. I use them all the time because it's really good to get a nice, good burning factory going. So you can just use these and put them in your mana spreader and generate some mana. So the next flower that we have on the list is the Entropinium. I think that's how you say it. This one is a little bit dangerous, to say the least. So let's just go ahead and remove these Endoflames. I'm going to go ahead and clear this out again. Kind of need my space. Cool. Oh, and there's a weird bug right now with Botania flowers. Anything that's, like any kind of special flower, it doesn't affect the regular flowers like these ones. But if you use the special flowers, Tinker's tools will break it and not return the flowers. So be careful when you're doing that. It's probably going to be fixed in the near future, but just be careful if you're trying to use a Tinker's tool on a flower and you don't get it back. You will not get it back. Anyway, so we'll go to the Entropinium. If we look through the book, igniting a block of TNT near the Entropinium will have a ladder absorb on the effect. So basically, what this flower will do is we put it down, and the book says that we have to ignite a thing of TNT nearby. Sounds kind of dangerous, but don't worry, you'll be fine when you do this. So let's go ahead and ignite this thing. What this will do is this will suck up the TNT blast. So bam, you can see it sucked up the TNT blast and put all the mana in the Entropinium. And it's got this huge buffer. So this flower is really good if you have a nice supply of TNT. So let's just go ahead and let's get another one of these. So let's just go ahead and do... Oh, not you. Need to clean out my inventory. All these seeds and flowers are getting in the way. We can go ahead and do this, for example, TNT, and ignite that. And this will explode, and it all went into that one. So I can ignite 2 more things of TNT here. Not that one. Be careful, kids. TNT is dangerous. So now that time I got sucked up by that one, and then now it's going to go into this one. So this is a great way of generating mana. But be really careful when you're doing this, because if a flower isn't completely empty, bad things will happen. So yeah, the Entropinium is a very, very dangerous flower. Although it's very helpful, just be very careful with it. So the next flower we're going to go over is called the Hydroinish. Yes, I don't know how to say that. But this works just like the Daybloom, except for it sucks up any water nearby and generates mana off of that. So what you're going to need is some light blue petals, a light blue mana petal, blue petal, a blue mana petal, and then a pink petal. And you just do the petal apothecary, and you'll get it out of there. I'm going to go ahead and just creative mode myself it. So what this will do is if I put that down here, is that any water, let's go ahead and get some water, any water nearby, this will suck it up. Gotta be a little careful there. So I'm actually gonna recess this in the ground. But if I go ahead and put this nearby, and I put the water down, you'll see eventually that it's gonna suck up the water. Come on, suck up that water. So there you go. Now it's sucked up the water and it's put up the mana in here, but then now it's put the mana inside the mana spreader instead. So I can just go ahead and just take some water and put it in here, and eventually it'll just, suck it up again, and then just convert it into mana. So it's really nice. So a nice way to actually, have some early game mana generation that's better than the Dayblooms just by a little bit is to set up an infinite water system behind the Hydrogenous. I just call it Hydrogenous. I know it's wrong, but it's just what I'm going to be calling it. So just go ahead and set up some infinite water pools over here. Like that. And then you have some early game water, or early game generation, which is pretty nice to have. So I can go ahead and, set up right here. I can set up another Hydrogenous. Actually, I'll put it here. So I put up another Hydrogenous right there. And just spread it out like that. Get some water over here. And there you go. I got some nice early game water generation, or water mana generation. And this will again just take up the water you can saw over there. Take the water and then put it in the mana spreader instead. So the Kekameris is an interesting flower. If we go ahead and look at the recipe for it, it just requires some mana petals and some runes, which we'll get into very shortly. Waiting till we get to actually using the mana to get into that. But this just requires some petals and then a rune of gluttony. And if you put a cake nearby, this thing will suck up the cake and generate mana that way. It's a very hungry flower and requires some cakes to do things. Oh, that's weird. The sky gets darker when I look at the cake. But this thing will, eat the cakes. So let's just surround this thing with cake. So there you go. This is one way, an interesting way to generate some mana. If you want, you can do it using Kekameris. So we can see we're building up a huge buffer of Kekameris, or of mana in these cake flowers. And the mana spreaders go into town, putting all our mana inside the mana pool. So again, interesting way to generate some mana. The next flower on our list is a Munchdew, which just uses leaves. So if we get a Munchdew. So let's just get a Munchdew here, and let's get some leaves. It will suck up any leaves nearby and generate mana off of those. It doesn't generate a whole bunch, just to kind of see what one leaf does. One leaf is like a little bit, It's about like equivalent in effectiveness to like a day bloom if you're talking about like one tick of whatever the item is. Let's actually get it back to noon. So this is really helpful if you have like a tree farm going off. You can put this munch dew here and just generate mana from leaves. Basically using nature to power nature. Isn't that convenient? Awesome. The next one is the Nightshade, which works just like the Day Bloom, except for it generates mana at nighttime. So if I go ahead and get myself some Nightshades, and these ones also don't have the whole restriction of being next to each other with the grid pattern. These will work actually in close proximity. Let's get it towards nighttime. Actually, this does have a restriction, so you need to not put these next to each other, but these will generate mana at nighttime. So you can see, there we go, got some mana shooting off. So same thing as Day Bloom, just work at night only. Next one that's kind of interesting is the Rosa Arcana. This thing runs off of experience points. So if I go ahead and get some Creeper Essence berries from Tinkers, to start giving myself some experience, you're going to see the Rosa Arcana is sucking up my experience to generate mana. Actually, I got a better way to do this. Let's just go ahead and do XP help. XP, let's do 100 levels. So this will start sucking up my mana. As you can see, the experience is slowly draining down. It's filling up the Rosa Arcana's internal buffer and going into this mana spreader, which is putting it in here. So this is, if you have an experience farm with, let's say, the Creeper Essence berries from Tinkers, if you want to use these, you can use them and then draw or right-click the berries, which drop the experience orbs, and then you can use those instead and power the Rosa Arcana. So again, it's another interesting way to generate some mana. The last flower on our list is the Thermalily. It works just like the Hydrogenist, except for it runs off of mana, or runs off of lava, excuse me. So if I go ahead and get a Thermalily, and let's just go ahead and recess this into the ground as well. And if I get a lava, well, we'll just do some lava stills. So if I get some lava, and like that, I put some lava down. What's nice about that is that the Thermalily will suck up the lava and then start generating some mana for the mana spreader. So you can see it's actually generating a decent amount of mana per second. So it has a burn time sort of similar to like the Endoflame. So if you wanted to use lava buckets, this is how you would do it. Because the lava, just pure lava alone, doesn't have a byproduct. So this is a great way to use lava to generate mana. Alright guys, that's going to cover it for this section of the tutorial. This one was just mainly about the crafting mechanics and the generating mana section. So just to kind of recap, went over the Petal Apothecary, went over Living Wood, Living Rock, and then all the mana generation and mana manipulation methods. So next tutorial we'll go over the different uses that there are for mana, both with flowers and then through other means like items and tools and actual storage methods that you can carry with you. And we'll also go over some of the baubles options that are available. So again, that'll be it for this one. The next part will be out soon, probably the following day after this, and I'll see you guys next time.